Lena froze as the knock echoed through the small cottage, her heart racing in her chest. Verek's voice, so unmistakably deep and menacing, sent a chill down her spine. "Ken," he called again, his tone no longer a request, but a command. "I need to speak with you." Her instinct screamed at her to flee, but Lena was trapped. She couldn't escape the cottage without drawing attention. Her scales have transformed into legs since the water on her body where she lay down has dried. Her legs felt as if they had turned to stone. She glanced at Cora and Sarah, who were both now awake and listening intently. Cora's face was a mask of calm, but Lena could see the tension in her eyes. Sarah, however, looked more afraid than ever. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Before Lena could answer, Ken stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. The same unease Lena felt seemed to wash over him as well. He didn't speak immediately but stood there, as if weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'll deal with him." As Ken made his way to the door, Lena's heart hammered in her chest. She wasn't sure what she feared more, the conversation that was about to unfold or the fact that she had no idea how to handle what was happening. Verek's presence loomed larger with every passing second. The door creaked open, and Verek stood in the doorway, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the cottage's small entryway. His dark cloak fluttered slightly in the breeze, and his eyes were fixed intently on Ken, not sparing a glance for Lena or the others. "I'm not here to waste time," Verek said, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. "I need you to understand the consequences of what you've done." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had seen Verek from afar before, heard whispers about him, but this was the first time she truly felt his power. It wasn't just physical, there was something dangerous about the way he held himself, as if he had already decided who lived and who didn't. Ken stood firm, though Lena could tell his resolve was starting to crack. "What do you want from me, Verek?" he demanded. "From you?" Verek's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Nothing. But I can promise you this, if you don't follow through, everything will fall apart. Your choices won't just affect you, they'll affect all of us." Lena felt her stomach tighten. There was more at stake than she realized. Verek wasn't just here for Ken, he was threatening everyone. "I've done nothing wrong," Ken said, though the uncertainty in his voice was evident. Verek's eyes flicked to Cora, and then to Sarah, before finally landing back on Ken. "You don't have a choice. You never did." Without warning, Verek stepped into the room, his presence filling the space with a suffocating pressure. "I suggest you think carefully about your next move," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Or I will make it for you." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Lena with a sickening feeling in the pit of her stomach. Once Verek was gone, the tension in the room became palpable. Cora was the first to speak, her voice steady but sharp. "What did he mean by consequences? What did he threaten you with, Ken?" Ken ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "I don't know. He's playing some kind of game, but I can't tell what the rules are. I'm not sure how much of it is true, or if it's just a scare tactic." Lena was still processing the weight of Verek's words. She had no idea what they were involved in, but it was clear that something much darker was at play than she had anticipated. "We can't just sit here and wait for him to make his next move," Cora insisted, her voice filled with determination. "We need to know what we're dealing with before he comes back." Sarah, however, was quieter than usual, her gaze fixed on the floor as though something was weighing heavily on her mind. "There's more, isn't there?" Lena asked gently. "Sarah, what do you know?" Sarah hesitated, biting her lip, before finally meeting Lena's gaze. "Verek, he's not just a man. He's tied to something ancient, something that has been building for centuries. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's connected to the curse I've been studying. What curse? Ken asked, his tone sharp. What are you talking about, Sarah? Sarah's voice lowered. It's the same curse I've been researching in the old books, the one that's been affecting the land for generations. If we don't stop it now, it could be the end of everything. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier with every word. Ken looked over at Cora, who was silently processing everything Sarah had just revealed. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but they were far from understanding the full scope of what they were up against. There's a pattern, Cora said finally, her eyes narrowing. Verek's actions, Sarah's curse, the land's unnatural behavior, it's all connected. But what is it? Lena's heart pounded as she glanced at the others. They were talking about something that could destroy everything they had fought to protect. But what could they do to stop it? What now? Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. We find out what Verek's really after, Ken said, his voice filled with grim resolve. We confront him, before it's too late. Verek opened the door again to come in, and Lena's heart raced as the door creaked open, and Verek's imposing figure filled the doorway. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, his presence was suffocating, like a storm on the horizon. You've been avoiding me, Verek said, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. You don't think I notice? Lena struggled to maintain her composure. She wasn't a fool, she knew better than to show fear. But deep down, she couldn't help the trembling in her hands. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice steady, but her pulse pounding. Oh, I think you do, Verek murmured, stepping closer. The smell of smoke and earth clung to him, an unsettling combination. He reached for her wrist, his touch cold and unyielding. I didn't come here to play games. I came for answers. Lena yanked her arm back, her eyes narrowing. Answers? I don't owe you anything. His smirk was all teeth. We'll see about that. Lena's mind raced as Verek continued to loom over her, his dark eyes searching hers like he could peer into her very soul. She had to get away, there had to be some way to outwit him. She had never seen this side of him before. The Verek she had known back at the river had been distant, aloof even, but this version. This was dangerous. Every movement he made felt calculated, purposeful. You can't stay here forever, Lena, he said, as though reading her thoughts. I've given you a chance. But the time for games is over. What do you want from me? She demanded, feeling the weight of his gaze more than ever. I want you to come with me, he replied, his voice soft but commanding. The village is no longer safe for you. They won't protect you. Lena's mind spun, trying to grasp the implications. If she left with him, would she ever see the village again? Would she ever see her friends, her family? But if she stayed, was that any better? Verek was a man of power, and he wasn't afraid to wield it. Don't do this, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Verek's cold laugh filled the room. Oh, but I already have. He took a step back, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed her once more. You're running out of time. I'll be back tomorrow to collect what's mine. Lena swallowed hard, her mind whirling. She couldn't afford to stay in the village. Not anymore. But what choice did she have? Verek's threats were no idle talk. And if she didn't do something soon, he would come for her. The next few hours were a blur. Lena packed as quickly as she could, her movements frantic and disorganized. She didn't even know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay here. She couldn't stay where Verek could find her. As she tied her bag closed, she heard footsteps outside. She froze. The air felt thick, the tension palpable. If it was Verek, she wouldn't be able to outrun him. But who else could it be? To her surprise, it wasn't Verek standing at the door when Lena opened it. Instead, a familiar face peered in, one she hadn't expected to see again. "I'm not here to fight you," the man said, his voice low and steady. "But I think you need help." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Galen?" He nodded, stepping into the room with a quick glance behind him. "I heard about Verek's visit. We don't have much time." "You've been following me?" Lena asked, a mix of surprise and suspicion in her voice. She had barely seen Galen since their encounter at the river, and here he was, offering his help. "I've been keeping an eye on Verek," he admitted, his tone darker now. "You're in over your head, Lena. He's not someone you can escape from easily. But you've got a chance, if you leave now." Lena wasn't sure if she could trust him. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she glanced at the window, trying to focus on the fleeting silhouette moving through the trees. It was almost as if the darkness itself had taken form, a specter that barely registered to the others. But to Lena, it felt real, too real. "Did you see that?" she whispered, almost to herself, her voice trembling. Ken turned, his brow furrowing. "What are you talking about?" I saw something. A figure, out there in the trees." Lena's voice dropped to a hushed tone. "It was watching us." Cora exchanged a quick glance with Ken, and then both turned to the window. The wind howled through the trees outside, but there was nothing. Just the shadows dancing in the moonlight. "It's probably nothing," Ken said, though the uncertainty in his voice made it clear he wasn't convinced. "Verek's presence is making us all paranoid." But Lena couldn't shake the feeling. That figure was real, and whatever it was moving closer. The next morning, the group gathered to discuss their next move. Lena, Ken, Cora, and Sarah were all seated around the table, tension thick in the air. The map of the land lay open before them, but it was more a puzzle than a plan. "Verek is up to something," Lena said, breaking the silence. "But what exactly?" Ken rubbed his temples. "We need to figure out what he's looking for. The curse, the land's decay, it's all connected. But where do we start?" Cora's eyes flickered to the map, tracing the lines of the forest with her finger. "The forest. It's the only place that makes sense. It's where Verek has always gone, and where the energy feels off. There's something there. Something he's hiding." Sarah looked uncomfortable, her face shadowed with doubt. "But the forest is dangerous. There are creatures, and other things. It's our only lead," Lena said, standing up. "We go into the forest. Together." The group nodded in agreement, their decision made. But as they prepared to leave, a thought gnawed at Lena. The figure she had seen in the trees, was it a warning? Or a sign of something far worse? As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew thick with tension. The usual sounds of the woods were muted, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal hands. Lena felt it, the same sense of being watched, the same creeping dread she had felt the night before. But this time, there was no mistaking it. The figure was real, and it was out there, somewhere in the woods. "We're being followed," Lena said, her voice barely audible as she moved closer to Ken. "Stay close," Ken warned, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "If it's Verek, we need to be ready." The group pressed on, but the deeper they went, the more distorted the world around them became. The trees seemed to shift, their branches twisting unnaturally, casting shadows that danced and flickered in the dim light. And then, just as they reached the heart of the forest, they heard it. A low, guttural growl. The growl echoed through the trees, sending a chill down Lena's spine. It was unlike any animal she had ever heard. Deep, menacing, and filled with hunger. Her eyes scanned the darkened forest, but there was nothing but shadows and the eerie silence. "We're not alone," Ken whispered, stepping forward, his hand tight on his sword. "Get ready." Cora's breath quickened, her eyes darting around nervously. "What is that? What's out there?" Before anyone could respond, the creature lunged. It was massive, its form hidden in the darkness, but the glowing eyes were unmistakable. The creature was large, almost like a wolf, but with claws that looked more like talons, and fangs dripping with saliva. Lena froze. It wasn't Verek's doing, but it was still a threat. The creature's roar shook the ground beneath their feet. "We need to fight back," Lena shouted, her heart pounding. Ken stepped forward, unsheathing his sword. "Stay behind me," he ordered. But before he could strike, the creature lunged again, this time aimed directly at Lena. The creature's claws swiped through the air with deadly precision. Lena barely managed to dodge, her heart racing as she scrambled backward. The beast was fast, relentless, and powerful. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger, and Lena could feel its presence closing in. "Lena!" Cora screamed, her voice filled with panic. "Move!" Lena barely had time to react before the creature lunged again. She was going to be too slow. She was going to... "Get down!" Ken roared. With lightning speed, Ken threw himself at the creature, pushing Lena out of the way. His sword flashed through the air, but it was too late. The beast's claw grazed his side, and he stumbled back, blood staining the ground. "No!" Lena cried, rushing to his side. "Ken!" He gritted his teeth in pain, but there was no time to dwell on the injury. The creature wasn't finished. It circled them, its growl growing louder, more vicious. "We need to finish this," Lena shouted. In that moment, a figure emerged from the shadows. The newcomer moved with eerie calmness, their silhouette barely visible through the trees. They were cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden, but their presence radiated power. The creature paused, its glowing eyes shifting toward the stranger. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, man and beast locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, the stranger spoke. "Begone," they commanded, their voice rich with authority. The beast hesitated, then, as if obeying an unseen command, it snarled and backed away, disappearing into the forest. Lena's breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. The figure stepped forward, lowering their hood. And there, standing before them, was someone Lena never expected to see again. "Verek?" Lena gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "But you... I thought you were..." Verek raised a hand to silence her. "I'm not your enemy, Lena." Lena took a step back. The last time she had seen Verek, he was a figure shrouded in mystery, a man whose true intentions were unclear. Now, he stood before her, a protector rather than a threat. "I'm here to help," he said, his voice serious. "But you need to trust me." Lena felt her heart twist. How could she trust him? After everything that had happened, after all the lies and deception. "Why should I trust you?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. Verek's eyes softened, and for a moment, Lena saw a glimpse of the person he once was, the person she had once thought was a friend. "I never wanted this, Lena," Verek replied. "But we are running out of time. There's darkness coming, and we need to face it together." Lena glanced at Ken and Cora, their expressions a mixture of confusion and suspicion. But despite their doubts, Lena knew they had no choice. They had to join forces. Lena's trust was stretched to its limits, but with Verek's return, the stakes had just been raised. What did he know about the coming darkness? And could they really rely on him after everything that had happened? The forest was only the beginning, and they were about to face something far worse than any of them had imagined.